We will start with the world of women's wrestling for this week. And the news that we saw, obviously, the main event this past week on Monday Night Raw, Raquel Rodriguez versus Rhea Ripley in the main event, in which saw the return of Nia Jax. We saw her come back at the Royal Rumble. We didn't know if that was her return then. It clearly was not, because she disappeared again, just as if she was a one-off, like a Royal Rumble spotting of Diesel or Doink the Clown. And though this past week on Raw, we have to think it's more than a one-off appearance, as Nia Jax has made her return to WWE. It seems more official this time. It seems more than just an appearance, as she interrupted the Women's Championship match in the main event. So I'll ask you, Brandon, what is your take on the return of Nia Jax? Kind of a controversial figure, whether it's, personally, her in-ring abilities. She's back. And what do you think WWE is thinking of here with the return of Nia Jax?
I actually think it's good. I feel like the women's division has been kind of, there's, you got Raquel, you got Rhea, Charlotte, but obviously Becky's now doing things with NXT, so it's maybe she's focusing in that area, as we alluded to in the beginning of the show. So there's not a lot of depth. We've talked about that on multiple episodes over the years, where the depth in the women's division hasn't been that great. And let's be honest, Rhea Ripley has just torn through the entire women's division, and you're at the point where Raquel Rodriguez. I always can say
same person, different names.
Same entity, same person. So yeah, Raquel Rodriguez was literally the last competitor that legitimately could beat Rhea Ripley, because everybody else she's just run through. She literally has been saying, who's next? Who pretty much almost like Goldberg style. Who's next? Because nobody's really doing anything. It's the division's kind of been floundering, and Nia Jax, yes, she does come with some baggage. We know she is who she is. She's very outspoken. Whatever you think of her on a personal level, I think having her in the ring, that's another thing, because some people don't really care for her in the ring either. But she brings legitimacy because she's been a champion before. She's been very dominant, and to bring her in the mix the way they did on Monday Night Raw this week was good, because there's multiple angles we can go here at this point. There's going to be a triple threat, I think, is going to happen, because she ticked off Raquel. Raquel got screwed in that match because Raquel is in control. Nia Jax interjects into the match, and then Rhea takes advantage, wins the match. So at first you think, okay, she's cool with Rhea. What's the deal here? And then she attacks Rhea. So not only can WWE use Nia Jax maybe in a singles match with Raquel, but they also can do a match with Rhea Ripley. I do think inevitably it's going to turn into a triple threat situation where you're going to have three powerhouses. And, my thought is initially Rhea Ripley's just going to tear through both of them, because Rhea Ripley, I don't think, drops the belt anytime soon. She's just that dominant. So for me, I think at this stage of the game, you're just bringing legitimate competition in. The NXT roster, as we've seen, I don't think there's that many great contenders, or at this point in the women's division. Tiffany Stratton, she could come up and get a promotion, but I think they're going to use Becky with her for now. I think there's going to be an issue there. I feel like that whole match with Becky Lynch, it was kind of a foregone conclusion that she was going to win, because it was obviously highlighted that before she won, she never won the NXT women's belt. So we kind of figured that was going to happen. So I feel like Becky's going to work down in that area and focus her energy there as the NXT Women's Champion. And I think it was having Nia Jax back was more to kind of bring the division up, because the division's kind of been lacking lately. So I'm okay with it. I thought the way they booked it on Monday Night Raw was good, because when Nia Jax interfered, Raquel didn't look bad in that match. It was a loss, but it was a loss because of Nia Jax. Raquel did not lose to Rhea Ripley clean, so to speak. So there's plenty of juice there. Rhea's just Rhea, and now that you bring in Nia Jax, who obviously is a very, people either love her or hate her. There's no in between with Nia Jax. You're either a big fan of hers or you just can't stand her. There's no middle ground with Nia Jax, in my opinion. So she brings that kind of more eyeballs too, because of her time on like on the Total Divas. Like she brings a lot of that as well. So it's somebody people know. She's legit. It's going to make the division, I think, better overall.
Well, before we go down to the NXT stuff, you talk about legitimacy, you talk about kind of one of these presences, and that's going to move us on to another point. And a spoiler alert, we're going to kind of give for Rampage this past week. I don't know how highly people hold the Rampage results, but Jade Cargill versus Chris Statlander this week on Rampage. It was Jade Cargill's return in AEW after losing the TBS Championship, in which ended her big Goldberg-style winning streak. But she did not beat Chris Statlander. She lost again this week on Rampage, and a lot of people are rumoring that maybe her next stop is to come to WWE. So I guess my thing is, if you wanted that Nia Jax kind of character, you got Jade Cargill with that idea. What do you think about Jade Cargill in WWE, and what would you do with her if you brought her over to WWE? What would your first right out the gate idea be?
I mean, because of how AEW has already used her and already made her, like you just mentioned, kind of like the Goldberg of the women's division there in AEW for a long time. I feel like anything but something massive would be a disservice to Jade Cargill, and she's a legit badass. Like her physique, there's not too many women on the planet, and especially in wrestling, that look like her. Like she's a legit badass, and she's gotten so much better in the ring since she's been in AEW. Like obviously she was green when she first started. She still has to add more to her tool bag, but I think she's enough of a draw for me, where I think WWE is going to roll the red carpet out for her. And I think, I think eventually, depending on how the rumored contracts go, if she could be the one that dethrones Rhea eventually. You know what I mean? Like Jade Cargill is one of those competitors where, okay, she beats Rhea Ripley on her first night. Like that could be legit. Like I wouldn't be surprised by that. Not only because of who she is, but she literally is a legit badass, and she's a draw. So I could see them use WWE using her almost. It's almost a copycat, I guess, but in a very similar fashion as AEW, and make her like just a force of nature where she just destroys everybody in her path. So I can see her doing that because she would really bring up that division. And the thing that I'm curious about is, like, what are they going to do with her? Like, they're not going to, her, I mean, Rhea Ripley, like, what are they going to do with her? Like, you're not going to just bring Jade Cargill in and then just discard, Rhea Ripley for everything she's done. So if they're going to bring Jade Cargill in, there's got to be a way to do it, I feel like. And I don't know if a night one thing, like I mentioned, would be a good idea where she beats Rhea on night one. I feel like what they should do is, assuming she signs the contract with WWE, she comes and, everything, and, she's a member of the roster. I feel like what they need to do is they need to make her a destroyer, like just kick everybody's ass. And then eventually Rhea gets to the point where it's like, all right, now it's time for these two bulls to lock horns and maybe make it a WrestleMania caliber kind of match. So that's where I'm at with Jade.
Do you hold any stock? And I know a lot of people love to talk this stuff with AEW and WWE and how people get buried in certain companies as revenge to the other company. But do you hold any stock in the idea that obviously Jade Cargill would be coming to WWE off of 2 consecutive losses after essentially being thrown to the side of AEW? And if she comes to WWE and she does a Roman Reigns thing, AEW will then be able to hold Chris Statlander up to that high regard, and kind of and AEW is not above making comments, right? They're kind of the lower brand that doesn't have to worry about that. So Chris Statlander, I can't imagine in promotions won't be like, AEW is obviously the place to be. I'm currently the women's champion because last I looked, the most dominant person in the other company is in the other company because I defeated them here. You're in football terms, I guess, your starting quarterback is our second string quarterback. So clearly we're the better team. That kind of thing. Do you hold any regard to WWE?
You could use. I mean, yes, I get it. You can use that kind of ammo. Like, I get that. Like, of course you could use that. I mean, yeah, I beat her up so bad, in the ring. Like, she got so distraught that she had to go to the competitor. Like, or Jade Cargill would just spin it, and she can, with her kind of persona, her kind of character, she can say, No, it's because Tony Khan doesn't want to pay me what WWE wants to pay me. It's all about the dollars and the respect and this and that. So you could spin it any way you want to spin it. Jade Cargill to me brought that women's division up, and she was the reason. And she could sell it like this: I'm the reason Chris Statlander is legit now because she beat somebody as legit as me. And you know what? Yes, she had the best of me. Those instances. But guess what? I'm bigger and better, and I'm in a better place than where she is, and she can thank me for what I gave her in AEW. So there's so many ways you could spin it. It to me, the WWE will get in front of this because Tony Khan in AEW, if the rumors are true and she goes there and all that, WWE is going to have a plan in place because they can easily brush it off. It's not, to me. I just think Jade Cargill is more of an attraction, and she's going to draw more money than Chris Statlander. No offense to Chris Statlander. I think Jade Cargill has more star appeal than Chris Statlander does.
So moving on to NXT, Becky Lynch, as you already alluded to, not just won the women's championship, but pretty much it was a foregone conclusion in a lot of our eyes. It was a very predictable outcome. And the predictable outcome I have is not necessarily because, the whole storyline of Becky Lynch has never been the NXT champion, but more importantly, the thing that has been pretty consistent this entire year in 2023 with WWE and NXT is Johnny Gargano, right? Stand and Deliver in LA, right? Baron Corbin and Dom, Great American Bash in Texas last month. The thing that's been legitimate is WWE, just like any independent wrestling company, you know it, I know it. I go to a lot of independent wrestling shows. You look at that independent wrestling poster, and whether they're in a match or a referee, they always put first and foremost right in the center the person who's selling the tickets. There you see Gangrel in the middle of that poster, and then a bunch of people you've never heard of in your life. There you see, Mickey James and a bunch of people you've never heard of in your life. And Jerry the King Lawler, whatever it is, right? That's what you see in the middle there. And that's kind of what NXT is doing right now. They're obviously running these smaller buildings for their pay-per-views. Their ticket sales are not like the main brand. They're not selling 14,000 and cramming them in. You can definitely walk up to literally any NXT pay-per-view and get your hands on a ticket. The TV shows are different. That's more of a controlled crowd down in Orlando. But the pay-per-views are in Bakersfield, are in Round Rock, Texas, or Cedar Park, Texas. They're not Madison Square Garden. They're not a sold-out American Airlines Center in Dallas. They're not any of these things. They're drawing 4,000 people to the show. Very Vengeance Day. What was it back? In Charlotte. They're drawing 4,000 to 5,000 people. They're only booking the arenas to draw 4,000 and 5,000 people. They're only booking the TV side of things. They're not crammed crowds, right? But what they're doing is they're putting somebody on there that gets eyeballs of main roster fans. Like I said, with Johnny Gargano, with Baron Corbin, with Dominic Mysterio being the NXT North American champion. So Becky Lynch is going to be the person that's going to be on the face of the poster for their next pay-per-view, No Mercy, on September 30th in Bakersfield, California. So that is the reason she won the championship in my eyes. And, I kind of think, and I've said this before, I don't really understand it, not just from WWE, but even other companies. I just went to Impact this past week, and I feel it about them as well. Put these events, I'm sorry to say, listen, I understand you're trying to hold these events to a high regard, but, it's going to be beneficial to put these events with other major events to get people in the arena that are already in town and make it an overall wrestling weekend. Put this event right up there with Fastlane or Payback and make these events kind of a weekend of events, or put it there with Survivor Series or what have you. Because the fact that Becky Lynch is the champion is WWE saying we need kind of a gimmick to sell tickets. The biggest pay-per-view that they've had this year, or the biggest crowd they've had this year, is the one that was at 9 o'clock in the morning in LA. I'll be 100% honest with you. That crowd ain't going to be that size, especially at 9 o'clock in the morning, if it doesn't have people from Australia, Japan, England, all 50 states that are in LA for WrestleMania weekend. If you put that at the Crypto.com arena in LA, all by itself at 9 o'clock in the morning. You're doing the same as you're doing anywhere else. You're drawing 4,000, maybe 5,000 at the most, right? So why, if you know that that's going to draw 11,000 just on that fact alone, why aren't we putting this up on a Saturday afternoon? Payback was on Saturday night. Why isn't the NXT pay-per-view like Sunday afternoon, Sunday night, Saturday afternoon, what have you, to get these bigger crowds? And if you do that, then maybe you don't need these additional gimmicks, because the gimmick would be, I'm just already in town and it's a wrestling show for $20, so why not? Because that's what they're doing now. That's why Becky Lynch is the champion. She's the champion to help and also not just to help ticket sales, but then to get eyeballs on who she's facing, right? She's going to probably be facing Tiffany Stratton in a rematch. And what's going to get us to know who Tiffany Stratton is when she comes to the main roster? Watching these matches against Becky Lynch, getting some eyeballs on her down at the NXT level. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, what do you think of this WWE strategy of, essentially putting these main roster attractions on NXT to get eyeballs? Because they didn't need to do that before. We obviously know the black and gold didn't need to do that before. That's a new thing. Do you think they need to do it? Do you think they should be doing it? What's your opinion on, like Becky Lynch's?
I like it. I think it's a good thing for NXT. I mean, it's not the glory days of the black and gold where, all the big names were there, and like you literally was the hottest ticket on the weekend, because we've seen those takeovers. You were at some of those takeovers, and it was popping. Like, it was probably the best show of the weekend. We're not there anymore. Obviously, NXT's gone through a lot of renovations and a lot of changes and this and that and everything else. And at the same time, they're rebuilding. They're still rebuilding. I know they are. It's obvious. Like, you could see the ticket sales. But for me, I think with Becky Lynch, it's a really good thing, because Becky is a known commodity. She's one of the biggest names in the business. Doesn't matter. AEW fans know who Becky Lynch is. Impact fans know who Becky Lynch is. She's a draw. She's one of the biggest names, not only on the women's side, but in the business as a whole. And I think having her do that, like, you're not bringing the entire main roster down. Like, yes, Dominic Mysterio is the North American champion. Like, you're not bringing the entire roster down to be like, all right, you guys suck. Like, we're gonna have to bring some more names down to really help. You're bringing a name here and a name there. Some guys and gals are being repackaged and restarted. Mustafa Ali, we've seen him do some things, but it's good because you mentioned it. You're going to get more eyeballs on a Tiffany Stratton, because when Tiffany Stratton's on Raw, in recent weeks here, if you're not watching NXT every week, or at least a casual fan like I am of NXT, you're like, who the hell is she? Like, who's this girl that looks like a Barbie doll? You know what I mean? Like, people looked at her and like, I don't know who the hell she is. I knew who she was. I knew she's pretty good in NXT. Like, she's legit. She's been in the business a short time. Like, she's legit. Like, I think she's going to be really good. But having her tied with Becky Lynch, not only does she get to work with Becky Lynch, learn the game more, because Becky Lynch, from a psychological in-ring, she tells great stories. Becky Lynch checks those boxes. That's why the fans love her so much, because she checks the boxes. She's great on the microphone. She's great in the ring. Like, and she wants to help the other competitors that are a little inexperienced. So for her, it's good for Becky Lynch to go down. She did something she never did in NXT. She won the belt, which is cool. But at the same time, she's not only getting the eyeballs, but she's going to be able to work with maybe not only just Tiffany Stratton, but some other competitors down there. Maybe a Roxanne Perez, names, people of that, caliber that have the talent, but they just need I hate saying it like this, because I in wrestling, everyone's like, you got to get the rub. You're getting the Becky Lynch rub. Like, if you get some of these competitors to get in a match, or even get on the microphone with a Becky Lynch and compete that way, you're going to make them more of a household name. So when they do come up to the main roster eventually full time, you're going to be like, oh yeah, she's the one that got in a really good match, or a really good promo. Like, it was a really good promo segment with Becky Lynch. Like, she held her own in that on the microphone. Things like that. And then you're developing more stars. So I think it's good for the business, because if you're just having NXT competitors facing NXT competitors all the time, you're like, okay, you're really good against other NXT competitors. Why don't we bring main roster stars down and see if you can compete? And then guess what? 9 times out of 10, you've seen it with Carmelo Hayes, for example. Main roster stars have come down. They've wrestled Carmelo Hayes. Who looks better in the end? Carmelo Hayes. Carmelo Hayes he's legit. He's a badass. I mean, we're going to talk about PWI. We'll talk about where he is in the rankings in a little bit. He's ahead of some big names, and that's because anytime Carmelo Hayes wrestles somebody from the main roster, he sometimes looks better than them. So when you get this type of caliber of a Becky Lynch to go down, that's great for business because so all these other competitors can pick her brain, learn more about the business, and guess what? As I like to say all the time, rising tides raise all ships, and that is great for the business, and it's going to make more money for NXT obviously as a whole, but in the end, it's about bringing the division up, and we want to see more competitors. We want to get more. We want to get behind these competitors, and how do you get behind competitors if you don't really know who they are? Becky Lynch is going to be the perfect way to introduce you to some of these superstars. So for me, it's a home run all the way around.
September 30th, WWE or NXT No Mercy in Bakersfield, California. So we will see the Becky Lynch effect and what that does both on ticket sales and viewership. The next NXT Premium Live event.